Pregnant woman is betrayed and left in the middle of the desert, but a dog appears and achieves the impossible. In the small town of Dry Creek, where the sun beats down mercilessly and the desert stretches as far as the eye can see, Anna carries 7 months of hope in her womb. At 25 years old, she gazes daily at the orange-hued horizon through the window of her modest home, gently caressing her belly while dreaming of better days. The wind whispers through the adobe houses, carrying with it the red dust that blankets everything like a shroud of loneliness on her weary shoulders. The local residents know her story, a determined woman who works as a nurse at the health clinic, caring for others while battling her own solitude. Her face, marked by a shy smile, conceals the tears shed on silent nights. Her relationship with Charlie, her partner, is like the desert dunes, unstable and unpredictable. The walls of her home hold secrets of arguments and empty promises, while the baby in her womb grows, oblivious to the approaching emotional storms. Anna cannot imagine that her destiny is about to change drastically, nor that her salvation would come on 4 paws from an unlikely desert guardian. Every morning, Anna woke up before sunrise, her eyes fixed on the mirror as she stroked her prominent belly. In her heart pulsed the burning desire to build a warm home for her child, a refuge where love would prevail over the adversities of the desert. The baby's room, still empty, eagerly awaited the furniture she was saving up to buy, penny by penny. Within the adobe walls of her house, she dreamed of a future different from the one she had lived. Anna envisioned Sunday afternoons filled with children's laughter, a table laden with love and understanding, far from the shadows of rejection that had haunted her since childhood. The little being growing in her womb represented a chance to restart, an opportunity to plant roots deeper than the old scars. On silent nights, when loneliness weighed heavier than the pregnancy itself, Anna wrote letters to her unborn child. In them, she promised to be the mother she never had, vowing to protect him with the strength of a lioness and love him with the tenderness that the desert held in its rare oases. Her quest was not just for survival, but for belonging. The night wind brought with it ancient stories of strong women who dominated those arid lands, and Anna clung to these legends like precious amulets. In her mind, she visualized herself as one of those heroines capable of turning barrenness into fertility, fear into courage, rejection into unconditional love. Her greatest wish was to prove to herself and to the world that her story would be different. Anna's relationship with Charlie was like a mismatched dance in the desert. While she dreamed of a future filled with familial love, he became increasingly distant and cold. Nights were filled with arguments that echoed through the adobe walls, and the ensuing silence weighed heavier than the scorching midday heat. Charlie worked as a truck driver, spending long periods away from home. When he returned, he brought with him a different scent and empty excuses about delivery delays. Anna noticed the signs, but chose to believe his words, feeding on crumbs of attention he occasionally offered. Visits to the health clinic, where Anna worked, became increasingly rare. Charlie showed no interest in the pregnancy's development, avoiding touching the growing belly or participating in prenatal appointments. His eyes, once bright with promises of eternal love, now wandered restlessly around the house as if searching for an escape route. During meals, silence was broken only by the clinking of cutlery and the wind blowing through the window cracks. Anna tried to initiate conversations about the future, about names for the baby, or about the need to prepare the child's room. Charlie responded with monosyllables or abruptly changed the subject, making his indifference clear. Charlie's behavioral changes began to affect the couple's routine. He started sleeping on the couch, claiming that the heat in the bedroom was unbearable. His clothes gradually migrated into a perpetually half-packed suitcase, as if he was ready to leave at any moment. The money that should have been saved for the baby's expenses began to mysteriously disappear. On the few occasions Anna managed to confront him about his absences or lack of commitment, Charlie reacted with outbursts of anger. He accused her of being controlling, of suffocating him with demands, of having gotten pregnant on purpose to trap him. His words cut like desert gusts, leaving invisible marks on Anna's soul. Neighbors began to comment on the frequent visits of an unknown woman to Charlie's house during his trips. Anna pretended not to hear the whispers, but each whispered word was like a needle in her heart. At night, alone in her bed, she would hug her belly and whisper, promises of protection to her child, vowing that he would never know the bitter taste of abandonment. The breaking point loomed like a sandstorm on the horizon. Charlie started arriving later and later, with the smell of alcohol clinging to his clothes. Their arguments became more intense, his words more cruel. Anna felt the baby stir in her womb during these moments, as if he could also sense the tension in the air. Deep down, Anna knew she was losing Charlie, not to the road or to work, but to a parallel life he was building away from her. With each passing day, she felt more invisible, more dispensable, as if she were just an old piece of furniture in a house he no longer considered his home. In the darkest night the desert had ever known, Anna's fate was sealed with a cry of hatred and contempt. Charlie, with anger and alcohol-glazed eyes, unleashed all his frustration on her. His gestures were violent, his words deadly. "You're a burden, you and this baby," he shouted, grabbing Anna by the arms and pushing her out of the house. Red dust danced around them, silent witnesses to that moment of definitive rupture. Anna, with her 7-month belly, tried to comprehend the surreal moment. Her legs trembled not just from fear, but from the brutal force with which Charlie led her to his truck. The night sky seemed to watch the scene with morbid coldness, revealing only a handful of distant stars. "You're not going anywhere," Charlie roared, tossing a small bag at her feet. Inside were a few clothes, very little money, and a single ID document. The cruelty of his action was sharper than any knife. The movements of the baby in her belly seemed to scream for protection. Anna felt every kick, every movement like a silent cry for survival. Her trembling hands instinctively hugged her belly. As Charlie pushed her onto the passenger seat, the truck cut through the desert darkness. No words were spoken. Only the engine and the creaking of the wheels on the dry earth broke the heavy silence. Anna looked out the window, her teary eyes reflecting the arid landscape that unfolded like a perfect metaphor for her soul at that moment. Suddenly, Charlie stopped the vehicle. They were in an utterly deserted stretch, where not even a cactus dared to grow. He got out, opened the passenger door, and literally pushed her out. "End of the line," he said coldly. "I don't want you. I don't want this child. Get out of here." The cruelty of his words echoed through the desert like a death cry. Anna fell onto the sand, feeling the impact on her fragile body. The truck sped away, leaving only a cloud of dust as a farewell. Alone, pregnant, abandoned in the most hostile desert imaginable, Anna realized that her life would never be the same. There, in that exact moment, her world was completely collapsing. The desert, once just a backdrop for her life, was now transforming into her jury, her executioner, and potentially her tomb. The night embraced her solitude, and distant sounds reminded her that survival would be her only path. Unbeknownst to her, Anna was about to embark on the most dramatic and transformative journey of her life. The desert held secrets, and among them, an unlikely story of courage and rebirth was beginning to be written. The first turning point. The first turning point carries a revealing weight. Anna realizes that Charlie's betrayal does not represent just a temporary rupture, but a definitive liberation from a toxic cycle of emotional imprisonment. The abandonment scene, once seen as a cruel sentence, gradually transforms into an act of redemption. At the exact moment Charlie leaves her in the desert, an invisible portal of transformation opens. The aggressive words he utters, "You" and "this child are a burden," echo not as a sentence but as a key that unlocks her internal chains of submission. Each cruel word functions like a chisel carving out her new identity. Anna's physical vulnerability, pregnant and alone in the desert, ironically contrasts with the inner strength beginning to emerge. Her body, once a territory of silence, now reveals itself as a fortress of resistance. The baby's movements in her womb seem to whisper secrets of courage, as if each kick were a manifesto of survival. Abandonment ceases to be a wound and transforms into liberation. Charlie, in trying to destroy her, paradoxically frees her from years of emotional imprisonment. The desert landscape, once seen as threatening, begins to metaphorically represent her rebirth, arid but full of possibilities for transformation. Charlie's violent gestures reveal more about his fragility than hers. His need to humiliate demonstrates his fear of losing control, while Anna discovers a strength that transcends physical or verbal aggression. Betrayal becomes a rite of passage, where old suffering dies to give way to an entirely new woman. In this crucial moment, Anna understands that her story will not be defined by a man who abandoned her, but by the courage to move forward. The desert, silent witness to her pain, becomes the first stage of her reconstruction. Every grain of sand seems to whisper stories of women who, before her, transformed internal deserts into gardens of resilience. The revelation lies not only in the act of betrayal, but in the profound understanding that her true journey is just beginning. Abandonment, once seen as an end, reveals itself as a new beginning. Anna is no longer the submissive woman who accepted crumbs of love, but a warrior ready to write her own story, with only the desert horizon and the life in her womb as companions. The desert, once a distant horizon, now became the stage for Anna's survival. Her body trembled, not just from the night's cold, but from the fear that consumed her whole being. The red sand seemed to suck her last strength, each grain a silent testament to her struggle. The baby's movements in her womb were constant, as if those small vibrations transmitted a resistance energy. Anna knew she couldn't give up, that she needed to find the strength to continue. Her mind wandered between despair and hope, stitching survival plans with the fine needle of determination. The first steps were slow and painful. Each movement demanded energy she could hardly believe she possessed. The weight of the pregnancy, combined with emotional exhaustion, turned every meter walked into an epic battle against her own despair. The desert's silence was broken only by the sound of her labored breathing and the crunch of her steps on the sand. The night advanced relentlessly, revealing a sky full of stars that seemed to watch her journey. Anna looked up, seeking some form of divine guidance, some sign that could indicate a direction, but what she found was only a star-studded cloak of cosmic indifference. Her clothes, already tattered, clung to her sweaty body. Thirst began to turn into torment. Anna knew the dangers of dehydration, especially in her pregnant state. Every drop of water would be precious. Every movement needed to be calculated to preserve her strength. Maternal instinct spoke louder than fear. She whispered softly to her unborn child, promising that she would find a way, that she would protect him at any cost. Her trembling hands caressed her belly, as if that gesture could convey security to both of them. Hours passed, and the desert seemed endless. Anna walked with increasingly slower steps, feeling exhaustion consume her muscles. The first signs of fatigue began to appear: subtle dizziness, labored breathing, a weakness that threatened to engulf her with each step. Survival would depend not only on her physical strength, but primarily on her mental resilience. Every negative thought was fought with memories of her childhood, moments of overcoming, stories of women who triumphed over impossible adversities. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the absolute silence of the desert. A bark, not an aggressive bark, but something that sounded like a call, a presence that could signify hope or another challenge in her survival journey. Anna stopped, her senses fully alert. The sound was coming from somewhere nearby, but the darkness made any precise identification difficult. Her heart pounded, mixing fear with a spark of hope that stubbornly refused to extinguish. The night in the desert seemed infinite, and Anna was about to discover that her true survival journey was only beginning. The desert night held a secret that Anna could not have imagined. At the moment, her hopes seemed to fade, like water in her dehydrated body. The sound of soft footsteps on the red sand began to approach. It was Lucky, a mixed-breed German shepherd and mutt, with a brownish coat that blended with the desert landscape. Lucky was no ordinary animal. His story was as marked by loneliness as Anna's. Abandoned years ago by a hunter during one of his inland trips, the dog had learned to survive in the harshest places. His eyes, marked by invisible scars, carried a wisdom that went beyond animal instinct. Every scratch on his body told a story of resilience. Every scar represented a battle won against the desert's cruelties. The dog approached Anna not as an intruder, but as a silent companion. His movements were calculated, demonstrating an intelligence that defied human understanding. He seemed to understand the vulnerable state of the pregnant woman, maintaining a respectful distance, but close enough to convey a sense of protection. Lucky's story was a mosaic of abandonment and overcoming. Before finding Anna, The dog had survived alone in the desert, hunting small rodents, drinking water from cacti, and finding shelter in rocky caves. His existence was a testament to how life can sprout in the most unlikely places, just like a flower that defies the aridity of the soil. There was something almost mystical about Lucky's approach. His movements were not those of a wild animal, but of a being who deeply understood the meaning of solidarity. His eyes, an amber tone reflecting the light of the first stars, watched Anna with an intensity that went beyond mere animal curiosity. Anna felt something different in that presence. It wasn't just a dog arriving, but an energy of protection that seemed to have been sent by some greater force. The baby in her womb moved more intensely, as if recognizing that unexpected guardian. Lucky stayed close, but not invasive. His lean body, marked by scars from previous battles, radiated a reassuring strength. He seemed to understand that Anna needed companionship, but not intrusion. A silent guardian bringing with him the promise of survival. The connection between Anna and Lucky transcended common logic. It was as if two souls marked by abandonment had found, in the midst of the harshest desert, a point of reconnection, with hope. The dog did not just come to help, but to rewrite the destiny of that pregnant woman and her unborn child. The desert, once a setting of total solitude, began to gain new contours. With Lucky's arrival, Anna perceived that her survival journey was gaining a new chapter, filled with possibilities and unexpected protection. Anna's internal conflicts grew more intense as she struggled to accept her new reality in the desert. Charlie's abandonment was not just a physical wound, but a deep rupture that reached the most sensitive layers of her soul. Her pregnant body, once a symbol of hope, now seemed to carry the weight of all her vulnerabilities. Lucky's arrival completely changed that arid and desolate scenario. The dog, with his deep eyes and invisible scars, brought a different energy to that hostile environment. Anna felt a mix of distrust and the need for connection as the animal cautiously approached. At first, he kept his distance, assessing Lucky's every movement with a blend of caution and curiosity. Both their survival instincts seemed to communicate in a silent language, made of glances and subtle movements. The dog did not show aggression, but a nearly maternal protection that echoed Anna's feelings. Internally, Anna was waging an intense emotional battle. Memories of Charlie mingled with the fear of the unknown, creating a storm of emotions that threatened to consume her. Every breath was an exercise in resistance, every thought a negotiation between the pain of abandonment and the hope of survival. Lucky approached slowly, as if understanding the fragility of that moment. His movements were calculated, always maintaining a distance that respected Anna's space. When he finally sat near her, his presence seemed to bring an inexplicable comfort, a protective energy that transcended common logic. The desert sounds, once threatening, began to gain new meanings. The wind that once seemed to carry only loneliness now brought whispers of hope. Anna felt that this encounter was not mere coincidence, but something beyond any rational understanding. Her trembling hand, almost involuntarily, reached out to Lucky. The dog remained still, allowing the hesitant touch, as if understanding the need for connection in that wounded woman. In that moment, two abandoned beings found a fragment of hope in each other. The tears Anna had held back for days finally found freedom. They were not just tears of sadness, but of a complex process of liberation. Lucky stayed there, his silent presence functioning as an emotional anchor in that desert crossing. The desert night took on new contours. The solitude that once seemed absolute was now broken by unlikely camaraderie. Anna and Lucky shared more than that arid space. They shared a story of overcoming, of survival against all odds. Her child in her womb seemed to perceive that transformation. The once tense movements became softer, as if Lucky's presence brought an inexplicable peace. Anna began to understand that her rebuilding journey was just beginning, and that the strength to continue came from the most unexpected places. The rising tension in the desert turned every movement Anna made into an epic battle for survival. The hostile environment seemed to conspire against her, testing her physical and emotional limits every second. The sand slipped through her fingers like an unrelenting hourglass, marking each instant of her fight against despair. The desert sounds gained an almost mythical dimension, The wind whispered ancient stories of women who survived even harsher territories, and Anna embodied that ancestral strength with every staggering step. Her pregnant body, once seen as fragile, transformed into a shield of resistance. Each movement of the baby in her womb functioning as a pulse of energy and hope. Thirst began to consume her thoughts. Her cracked lips told silent stories of resistance, while her mind waged war against the fatigue trying to dominate her. The maternal instinct functioned like supernatural fuel, preventing her from collapsing even when all forces seemed to abandon her. The tracks of her steps in the red sand were like a narrative of courage, each imprint symbolizing a chapter of overcoming. The gravity of the moment blended with an almost dreamlike sense of extreme challenge. Anna was no longer just an abandoned woman, but a transforming survivor. The desert presented its challenges as initiatory trials. The temperature fluctuated between suffocating heat and the night's biting cold, testing her adaptability. Every horizon seemed endless, without any sign of hope or salvation. But inside her, a flame of determination burned inexhaustibly. The baby's movements became more frequent, as if those small vibrations communicated directly with maternal courage. It was as if the child already understood that they were united, not just biologically, but in a survival journey that transcended natural logic. The arid landscape took on almost metaphysical contours. Anna felt that every grain of sand, every gust of wind, every distant shadow held secrets that could mean her salvation or her final sentence. The desert was not just a place, but a living character that tested her resilience. Her legs trembled, not just from physical exhaustion, but from accumulated emotional tension. Charlie's betrayal, the abandonment, the pregnancy, all condensed into that liminal moment where survival would be decided in fractions of a second. Anna took a deep breath, transforming fear into fuel. Suddenly, a distant sound interrupted the absolute silence. A bark, not an aggressive bark, but something that sounded like a call, a presence that could signify hope or another challenge in her journey. Her senses, previously dulled by exhaustion, sharpened to an almost superhuman clarity. The desert held its greatest secret, and Anna was about to discover that her true survival journey was only beginning. Among the red sand and the infinite sky, something extraordinary was about to happen. In that precise moment, Anna felt that her true strength did not reside only in her physical ability to survive, but in the profound revelation of her own essence. The desert, once a scene of abandonment, transformed into the sacred womb of her inner rebirth. Her eyes, once dull with fear and submission, gained a different shine. She was no longer the fragile woman dependent on Charlie, but a force of nature, ready to challenge the destiny that was being imposed upon her. Every breath echoed like a manifesto of resistance, each heartbeat a declaration of independence. The most powerful revelation came from within herself. She now understood that her vulnerability was not weakness, but an inexhaustible source of courage. Charlie's abandonment would not destroy her, but rebuild her on more solid and authentic foundations. The baby in her womb seemed to perceive this transformation. His movements, once restless, became rhythmic, as if dancing to the rhythm of the new maternal energy. It was as if an ancestral connection of feminine strength was established between mother and child, a silent pact of survival. The arid landscape began to reveal an almost mystical complicity. The dunes rolled as if whispering secrets of resistance. The few sparse plants seemed to bend in a gesture of support. Anna felt that she was no longer alone, even in the apparent emptiness of the desert. Her mind, once occupied with past hurts and traumas, freed itself. Every negative thought was discarded like sand carried away by the wind. A surprising clarity emerged. Her story would not be defined by betrayal, but by the way she would overcome that moment. Lucky's presence was more than a possible companion on her journey. It symbolized the unlikely alliance between resilient beings united by the need for survival and the search for genuine connection. Climactic transformation. Anna's transformation was complete. She was no longer the submissive woman left in the desert, but a determined warrior ready to write her own destiny. Charlie's abandonment would not be her final chapter, but the prologue to a story of overcoming and rebirth. A storm in the desert was brewing with primitive and unrelenting energy. The first signs came through gusts of wind that lifted sand whirlwinds, blurring horizons and creating a chaotic and threatening landscape. Anna felt every movement of nature as if it were an extension of her own internal struggle for survival. The first raindrops fell thick and heavy, mixing with the desert's red dust. Her body, already exhausted, began to feel the first signs of labor. Contractions came at increasingly shorter intervals, turning every breath into an act of pure resistance. Lucky, the dog who had appeared as an unexpected guardian, stayed by her side. His movements were calculated and protective, as if he understood the fragility and strength of that unique moment. His eyes, once wandering the desert, now fixed on Anna with an almost human intensity of compassion. The pain of childbirth mingled with the brutality of the environment. Each contraction was a cry of defiance against the destiny that had tried to destroy her. Anna clung to the wet sand, her fingers digging into the earth as if seeking an anchor for her own existence. The baby was about to arrive, and neither the storm nor the desert could prevent that birth. Lucky moved quickly, searching for some kind of shelter. His experienced paws knew every nook of that arid territory. In a few moments, he found a small rocky formation that could protect them from the heavy rain. With determined movements, he began to guide Anna toward that refuge. The elements seemed to conspire simultaneously. Rain poured in torrents, the storm roared like a wild beast, and Anna felt her body preparing for the most transformative moment of her life. Every cry was a manifesto of courage, every breath a declaration of resistance. Lucky remained close, his body serving as a barrier against the cutting wind. It seemed he understood something beyond human logic, that a child was not just being born there, but a new story of overcoming was taking shape. His vigilant eyes alternated between Anna and the stormy horizon. Epilogue. The epilogue revealed itself as a moment of profound transformation for Anna. The desert, once a territory of abandonment and solitude, metamorphosed into the sacred womb of her personal rebirth. Her new life unfolded as a sanctuary of hope, built with fragments of her resilience. Lucky, the dog who had emerged as an unexpected guardian, established himself as an essential part of this new family. Together, Anna, her newborn child, and the stray dog formed a trio united not by blood ties but by the mutual need for survival and affection. The small farm they managed to establish near the desert served as a living symbol of their overcoming. Every inch of cultivated land represented a healed wound. Every sprouting plant symbolized her inner strength. The once hostile, arid soil transformed into fertile ground of possibilities. Days followed a harmonious and reconstructive rhythm. Anna worked tirelessly, dividing her time between caring for her child and developing the small property. Lucky remained as a vigilant protector, his watchful gaze alternating between the child and the distant horizons. Anna's emotional scars did not disappear completely, but lost their destructive power. Each dawn was an opportunity to redefine her story, to transform abandonment into autonomy, fear into courage. Her child grew as a living witness to this transformation, immersed in unconditional love. The local community, initially distrustful, gradually recognized the strength of that woman. Stories about her desert survival journey circulated like local legends, inspiring other women to believe in their own resilience. Lucky continued to be more than a pet. He was a companion, a protector, a living symbol that true connections transcend any expectation. His silent presence reminded Anna that not all encounters are accidental, that the universe subtly conspires to offer help in the most unlikely moments. The farm sounds, the bleating of a few sheep, the crowing of roosters, the occasional cry of the baby, replaced the oppressive silence of the desert. Every noise represented life, movement, a fresh start. The once submissive and fearful woman had been completely redefined. At night, when her child slept and Lucky rested nearby, Anna contemplated the horizon. Her eyes no longer carried the shine of wounded naivety, but the luminosity of someone who understood that true freedom is born from the ability to reinvent oneself. The desert, silent witness to her journey, seemed to whisper secrets of transformation. Anna had proven that life is not about being left behind, but about choosing to move forward, even when the path seems impossible. The conclusion of this extraordinary journey transcends mere physical limits, delving into the depths of human transformation. Anna was no longer the fragile woman abandoned in the desert. but a force of nature redefined by adversity. Her story, once marked by abandonment and pain, transformed into a manifesto of resistance. The desert, silent witness to her resurrection, held the secrets of her deepest metamorphosis. Every grain of sand carried the testament of her courage. Every gust of wind whispered her story of overcoming. The encounter with Lucky was not mere chance but a cosmic design of survival. The stray dog, now an essential part of her new family, represented more than a companion. He was the living symbol of connections born in the most unlikely moments. Her message echoed beyond the desert's boundaries. No woman needs to accept the role of a victim. True strength does not reside in submission, but in the ability to reinvent oneself, to transform wounds into scars of power. Every woman carries within herself a desert of possibilities, just waiting for the courage to bloom. The call was direct and urgent. Do not accept being defined by your traumas. Your story does not end in abandonment but begins with the decision to move forward. Transform your pain into fuel, your tears into energy, your fears into the fuel for transformation. Anna's journey served as a beacon for all women who felt lost, abandoned, without hope. There is no desert so barren that it cannot be transformed into fertile ground for a new beginning. Strength lies not in avoiding storms but in dancing even when the world seems to crumble. Lucky, the dog who appeared as an unexpected guardian, symbolized that protection can come from the most unlikely places. True alliances transcend race, species, social status. Genuine love does not choose, it simply happens. Her final message was an invitation to action. Look at your scars not as marks of wounds but as proof of your incredible capacity to survive. Every woman harbors within herself a warrior, a survivor, a force of nature capable of transforming deserts into gardens. The challenge was set. What will your story of overcoming be? What internal deserts are you willing to traverse? Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to continue even when everything seems impossible.